This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Israel's Prime Minister and President Trump talk Iran and Jerusalem in Washington.
It's encapsulated in one word: Iran.
Plus, Rise and Kill, a new book about targeted killings.
If someone comes to kill you, rise up and kill him first.
And Jerusalem streets are filled with runners for the annual marathon. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. We're coming to you from the Jerusalem Marathon, where thousands of runners took to the streets. We'll have more about that later in the show, but first let's take a look at the visit of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Washington. Iran is a growing threat to Israel, and that was a key topic when the Prime Minister met with President Trump at the White House. Ben Kennedy brings us that story from Washington.
Iran was no doubt a focus during talks with President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who said that we need to stop this country that chants death to Israel, death to the U.S.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Israel's Prime Minister joined President Trump at the White House to talk about, among many things, Iran.
If I had to say what is our greatest challenge in the Middle East to both our countries, to our Arab neighbors, it's encapsulated in one word: Iran.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accused Iran of aggression along Israel's border and not giving up its nuclear ambitions despite the Iran nuclear deal, an agreement set up by President Obama and other countries and considered a bad deal by many American lawmakers.
Iran must be stopped. That is our common challenge.
And Netanyahu wants Trump to attend the U.S. Embassy opening in Jerusalem, set for May, to tie into the 70th anniversary of the founding of modern Israel.
We're looking at coming. If I can, I will, but I'll be there again. Israel is very special to me, special country, special people, and I look forward to being there, and I'm very proud of that decision.
No decision has been made on the details of a U.S. proposal for peace between Israel and the Palestinians. Jared Kushner's role in brokering a Middle East peace deal came under question in Monday's White House briefing, following his security clearance downgrade.
He doesn't have the security clearance that he had before.
As we've said many times before, I'm not going to comment on any individual security clearance, but
to carry on duties today in that meeting.
His role wasn't impacted today.
The White House meeting came amid allegations of corruption against Netanyahu, who is facing bribery, fraud, and even trust allegations in Israel. Netanyahu was questioned by police ahead of his trip to Washington, where he denied any wrongdoing. Netanyahu will also speak at the annual Pro-Israel Policy Conference here in Washington, hosted by the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. He'll be following speeches by Vice President Mike Pence and UN Ambassador Nikki Haley Monday night.
The UN's bias against Israel has long undermined peace by encouraging an illusion that Israel will just simply go away. Israel's not going away.
The United States of America will never compromise the safety and security of the Jewish state of Israel.
Ben Kennedy, CBN News, Washington.
Netanyahu was a featured speaker at this year's AIPAC conference, talking about the advances of the Jewish state and the dangers of Iran and other threats. Amber Strong has this look at the Prime Minister's message to Washington.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is pretty happy with President Trump and wasted no time telling the pro-Israel crowd at the AIPAC Policy Conference.
It's especially great to be in America's capital now that he has recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
Fresh off of Monday's Oval Office meeting, Netanyahu made it very clear that his relationship with this White House was stronger than ever.
We appreciate the efforts of President Trump's superb team. Thank you all for your hard work for peace.
When it comes to the state of Israel, Netanyahu got right to it, breaking down what he calls the good, bad, and beautiful facing the country. The good? Israeli technology and defense, like their famous Iron Dome, which he says is due in part to U.S. support.
Thank you, Congress, Republicans and Democrats alike.
He also called out those who don't back Israel, specifically supporters of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement known as BDS.
Pretty soon, the countries that don't have relations with us, They're going to be isolated.
But what about the bad? Netanyahu pointed straight to one place.
We must stop Iran. We will stop Iran.
He condemned President Obama's 2015 Iran nuclear agreement and said Iran, along with surrounding nations, are looking for ways to attack.
Last week we read in the book of Esther about an earlier Persian attempt to exterminate our people. They failed then, they'll fail now.
Netanyahu's list didn't include his mounting legal troubles. On Monday, a former top aide agreed to turn state's evidence against the prime minister and a potential bribery charge. Instead, Netanyahu focused on what he calls the beautiful, U.S.-Israel relations, especially when it comes to pro-Israel legislation.
Israel hopes that the passage of the Taylor Force Act will make clear to President Abbas that America has zero tolerance for terror.
That call for congressional support was clear at AIPAC, with congressmen from both sides of the aisle vowing to back the Jewish state.
The security of the United States is strong when our bond with Israel is strong.
But while there may be bipartisan support on Capitol Hill, Senator Marco Rubio says it's a different story in the classroom.
I'm deeply concerned about what's happening in many American college campuses and the sort of embedded anti-Semitism that we see.
Now, over the last couple of days, about 3,600 students have made their way through AIPAC. And that's exactly what organizers say they want to see, a future built on a solid foundation of U.S.-Israel relations. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
This is the 5K run as part of the Jerusalem Marathon, where you see a lot of young people and families running together. Well, back in AIPAC at the conference, Netanyahu warned about an aggressive empire by Iran that's trying to surround the Jewish state. His deputy foreign minister, Zippy Hotovely, gave foreign diplomats a first-hand look at that burgeoning empire along Israel's border with Gaza. Her message, Israel won't give up Judea and Samaria, which would allow Iranian-backed groups to take over like in Gaza. CBN News Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has that story.
Darkness is descending on our region. Iran is building an aggressive empire. Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, Yemen, more to come.
Part of that darkness often covers communities along Israel's border with Gaza, such as Sderot. This is Mishkan Ella, a community center named for Ella Abu Kassis. In 2005, a rocket fired from Gaza killed 17-year-old Ella. When the red alert sounded, she threw herself over her 10-year-old brother, giving her life to save his. Sderot is known as the bomb shelter capital of the world. Nearly every home and bus stops and even playgrounds have their own private bomb shelters. That's because residents have just a few seconds to run for shelter when the air raid sirens sound. Israel's deputy foreign minister, Zippy Hotovely, used this as a chilling example as she took dozens of foreign diplomats along the Israeli-Gaza border.
First of all, this is my duty, I think, to let them experience Israel, to see the real challenges on the ground.
The same year terrorists killed Ella Abu Kassis, Israel uprooted about 9,000 Israelis from the Gaza Strip in a move known as the disengagement. Since then, more than 15,000 rockets have rained down on civilians in communities close to the border.
This was my message in the beginning of the day. Well, 2005, when Israel completed the disengagement from Gaza, people believed that Gaza will become a Middle East Singapore. And it was based on a false narrative, on a false beliefs.
And after the rockets came tunnels, another means to launch terror attacks against Israelis.
It was important for me to show the complexity of a country that has a real battle, a real war with the Hamas organization, but from the other hand is doing everything in order to give humanitarian aid to the population of Gaza.
Each day, some 400 truckloads of food, medicine, and other goods pass into Gaza, and yet attacks continue against Israel.
Unfortunately, as long as Iran is sponsoring Hamas, we're having a very aggressive actions of Hamas against Israeli population.
The Trump administration has shown aggressive support for Israel, and the world is waiting for its Middle East peace plan. For decades, previous plans have included a demand for Israel to withdraw from most of the West Bank. But Hotovelli maintains pulling out from Judea and Samaria would only create another vacuum, fostering terrorism.
That when they're offering the same thing in Judea and Samaria, they're basically offering second Gaza in Judea and Samaria. No Israeli is willing to have another horrible place like Gaza in our eastern border.
And as long as Iran is backing terror groups on Israel's borders, that peace is unlikely to happen. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Sderot, Israel.
Coming up, Rise and Kill, a new book about the history behind Israel's use of targeted killings. One of the iconic places where the marathon passes by is here at the Jaffa Gate, the entrance to Jerusalem's Old City. Well, ever since its founding, Israel has faced extermination from its enemies. And one of the ways it's fought back is the controversial use of assassinations. And now we're learning for the first time why this deadly technique has played such a role in Israel's history. The book is called Rise and Kill First, The Secret History of Israel's Targeted Assassinations. Award-winning journalist Ronen Bergman told CBN News the title comes from an ancient Jewish writing he heard quoted by members of Israel's intelligence services.
They used the phrase from the Babylonian Talmud, which says, if someone comes to kill you, rise up and kill him first. The mindset which says, when every decade your prime nemesis, your chief adversary, your main enemy, declares publicly that its main goal is to destroy Israel, then there's no other choice but rise up and kill him first.
Since its founding, that's been the public goal of Israel's enemies, from Saddam Hussein to Yasser Arafat to Iran's Mahmoud Ahmadinejad.
All of these, when they are your enemies, you would do whatever you can to defend your country and your people.
Bergman says after the Holocaust, Jews followed three lessons that permeate Israel's intelligence services.
First is that there will always be a Gentile who is after us to kill us. Second, all or most of the other Gentiles will not help, so we can rely only on ourselves. And third is that we need to have a safe haven, a refuge, a country of our own to defend it, and to defend it with all means possible.
In his book, Bergman explains the secret that makes Israel's intelligence the best in the world.
But there's one extra thought, and that thought is that they are the guards on the wall. They are, if borrowing a phrase from Star Trek, they are the final frontier, guarding the safety of the country and the security of the citizens of Israel and Jews worldwide, not just in Israel. They believe that if they don't work today with everything they have, then tomorrow Jews are going to be killed.
Bergman's book takes readers through how Mossad chief Meir Dagan urged Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and then Defense Minister Ehud Barak to use assassinations and cyber warfare against Iran instead of bombing its nuclear facilities. He also describes the elimination of Hezbollah commander Imad Muniyah, the most wanted terrorist in the world, and how Yasser Arafat escaped dozens of assassination attempts. We asked about the dilemma of targeted killings.
There are two questions that are relevant. Is it effective, and is it legally and morally justified?
After 9/11, the rules changed, and the U.S. began targeted killings with help from Israel's intelligence expertise. Now many Western nations also follow the Israeli model. Bergman told us, however, the real thing is far from life on the big screen.
In real life, in the real world of Israeli intelligence, what one James Bond does is divided into dozens, sometimes hundreds of people, each one with a special expertise and a special task.
Targeted killings remain an intense debate, and only Israel's prime minister can approve them. Yet with all its success, Bergman quotes one ex-Mossad chief who summed up their dilemma.
At the core of what we did every day in Mossad was that dilemma of what does a democracy under grave threats allow itself to take and do to defend its citizens, while it knows that it's unfortunately might violate other values.
Bergman's book took 8 years to write and includes more than 1,000 interviews.
I wanted to show how unique Israeli intelligence is, but how entangled its history is with the history of the country.
On the eve of Israel's 70th anniversary, Bergman, the son of 2 Holocaust survivors, sees it as a contribution to the ongoing remarkable story.
Sometimes I walk in the streets of Israel and I say, this is really a miracle. I think what was achieved here during the last 110 years, since the early 20th century, can not be described as nothing but a miracle. And I'm so happy to be part of that.
Up next, a look at Gaza's lifeline from Israel. Here we are in the Old City, just across from the Tower of David Museum, as the runners continue to pass by. As we mentioned in an earlier story, and here some of the runners are enjoying their time, although Israel faces threats on its southern border, it still must provide goods to Palestinians living inside Gaza. 2 years ago, CBN's Julie Stahl went to that vital crossing and showed how some of the provision given to the Palestinians are materials that can be used against the Jewish state.
Palestinians claim the Gaza Strip is under siege from Israel. Yes, Israel and Egypt enforce a total blockade to prevent weapons from going to Hamas in that region, but it's far from a siege.
It's a little bit complicated, but unfortunately, it's not the border between Swiss and French.
Egypt closed its border with the Strip last year, leaving Israel as the sole provider for Gaza. This crossing, known as Kerem Shalom, serves as a lifeline for Palestinian Arabs in the Gaza Strip.
It's not a pleasant place. A lot of concrete, a lot of weapons, a lot of shelters, a lot of cameras, but the reason is that we have to serve innocent people, but they are from territory that we have threat, that been occupied by groups of terror.
Israel facilitates the passage of food, cooking fuel, building materials, and other necessities. Many Gazans are poor and unemployed, yet Gaza also benefits from this crossing because it can export vegetables, home goods, and scrap metal to Israel and elsewhere. Thousands of tons of goods are transported each day from Israel and moved through 12 giant rooms on this 160-acre plot.
We share the same rooms, but not the same hours. When we finish our procedures, we go outside and allow the Palestinian team that are nearby us take the goods to the Palestinian side.
Ami Shaked runs the Kerem Shalom crossing, where both Israelis and Palestinians work but never see each other.
When you've been attacked hundreds times by groups of terror, trust is not the first stone that you put in this building. We don't try to build here relationship. We try to live under threat.
You might think that since Kerem Shalom is such a lifeline, that it would be spared, even protected.
This crossing point have a bad history with attacks. In 2008, it was totally destroyed by attack of Hamas groups. In 2012, it was attacked by Jihad Global from Egypt, and Egypt is not far away from here, it's 100 meters. And between these things, it was attacked by rockets and mortars from Gaza side.
In addition to attacks, there must be constant monitoring to prevent smuggling attempts that bolster the enemy.
I can tell you that in the last months, we kept here 2 kinds of important chemicals. Let's say that they're enough for 5,000 rockets.
And that's not all. Israel says Hamas is stealing 95% of the cement intended to rebuild Gaza and using it to build tunnels to attack Israel.
We found our cement on tunnels underground inside Gaza.
In April, the army exposed a tunnel near Kerem Shalom intended to infiltrate Israel and attack civilians. About 60,000 Israelis live in this area around Gaza. Sharon Calderon is one of them.
This is something terrifying. We don't know when the terrorists are going to get out and from where.
Shaked pointed out that although Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005, Uprooting 9,000 Israelis in the process, attacks continue.
Israel, even under threat, do the best that she can to help the people of Gaza to live a normal life. But unfortunately, the most of the things are not in the hand of Israel.
That's why it's important that the international community somehow convinces the Gazans of the need to help themselves. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Kerem Shalom, Israel.
Running in the largest Jerusalem winter marathon yet. More than 35,000 runners participated in this year's Jerusalem Winners Marathon, running through the streets of the city on a chilly and windy morning. A record number of 4,000 of them from 72 countries around the world. This is the 8th Jerusalem Marathon, but the first one since President Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and planned to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
It's not just move, it's the recognition. Not that we needed it, but the fact that the United States of America recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of the Jewish people. And today you see people run the streets where kings and prophets walked here in the city of Jerusalem. It's very exciting times for us.
Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat told CBN News that the marathon is more than just sport.
The marathon is not just a sportive event, it's a spiritual event. To showcase the city, to go in and out the old city, to see the beautiful sights of the most beautiful city in the world is a big deal.
It's amazing, it's humbling and incredible that you can just run a race through the old city.
The race begins near Israel's Knesset and takes runners through the old and new city. The event includes a marathon, half marathon, 10-kilometer, 5-kilometer, and family run. Barkat says the marathon gives runners a better understanding of the city.
In Jerusalem is a marathon you have to do at least once in your lifetime. To understand the challenges, to understand the city, to feel the city, to breathe the city.
It's a bit emotional actually, because as a kid you study it in school and you read about it, but to be here, it's not the same.
It's a wonderful city. It's a real, it's a special activity, special place. It's a special run, a special marathon for me and for I think everybody else.
Well, maybe someday you can join the runners here in Jerusalem's old city as they pass through historic Zion Gate. Well, that's it for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.